In the story of American pickup trucks, Dodge has always occupied an unusual position. It was rarely the loudest name in the room, rarely the biggest seller, and almost never the most polished. While Ford and Chevrolet built their empires through scale, marketing, and mass appeal, Dodge survived by walking a much narrower path, one defined by mechanical honesty, durability, and engineering discipline. This was not a brand born in glossy boardrooms or advertising agencies. Dodge was born at a workbench with oil-stained hands and a constant awareness that machines ultimately answer only to physics, not promises. When John and Horace Dodge entered the automobile business in the early 1910s, they were not dreamers chasing fashion or status. They were master mechanics. Long before the Dodge name appeared on radiators and tailgates, the brothers were building parts, engines, and complete assemblies for other manufacturers. That period, spent largely behind the scenes, shaped a very different kind of corporate DNA. At Dodge, engineering came first. Everything else followed. A component that looked impressive but failed under load was useless. A design that sold well but wore out quickly was unacceptable. That mindset would quietly guide the company for the next century. In 1916, that philosophy was tested in a way no laboratory could ever replicate. The Pancho Villa punitive expedition turned northern Mexico into a brutal proving ground of sand, heat, rock, and distance. Mechanical weaknesses did not remain hidden in those conditions. They failed openly and often. When General Pershing's forces selected Dodge vehicles instead of relying solely on horses, it was more than a logistical choice. It was an early vote of confidence in the reliability of machines built by people who understood stress, wear, and endurance. Dodge vehicles did not need special treatment. They were expected to work, and they did. World War I only reinforced that reputation. By modern standards, a 35-horsepower engine sounds almost insignificant. But in the context of the late 1910s, it was the steady heart of more than 12,000 vehicles placed into military service. These were not pampered machines. They ran under scarcity, rough handling, and constant demand. Dodge learned an important lesson during those years. When conditions are harsh and resources are limited, simplicity and robustness matter more than innovation for its own sake. Then, in 1920, just as the company was finding its footing, disaster struck. Both Dodge brothers passed away within months of each other. What remained was not merely a brand, but a full-scale industrial operation running at speed without its founders at the helm. Leadership vanished overnight, and Dodge became an attractive target in a turbulent financial environment. Ownership shifted hands, first to investment groups and eventually toward a name that would define its future, Chrysler. By the mid-1920s, Dodge was acquired by Chrysler in a deal valued at roughly $2.4 billion. Even as sales momentum was beginning to soften, on the surface, it seemed contradictory. Why pay so much for a brand that was no longer surging? The answer lay beneath the body panels. Dodge's real value was not its showroom appeal, but its manufacturing capability, its engineering foundation, and its ability to produce vehicles that could survive abuse. Those assets could not be recreated quickly or cheaply, and Chrysler understood that. As the 1930s approached, Dodge began to focus more deliberately on trucks as tools rather than fashion statements. Flathead six-cylinder engines were adopted not because they were exciting, but because they were dependable and easy to service. Cab-forward designs were introduced for practical reasons: better weight distribution, improved control, and more usable cargo bed space. When the cab moves forward, every inch reclaimed belongs to the job, not the styling department. Dodge trucks were becoming more efficient instruments, shaped by work rather than trends. In 1939, Dodge introduced a phrase that quietly summarized everything the company stood for: job rated. It was not a slogan meant to impress at a glance. It was a declaration of intent. A Dodge truck was not defined by appearance or generalized specifications, but by the specific task it was built to perform. With hundreds of configurations available, Dodge rejected the one-size-fits-all philosophy that dominated the market. Instead, it chose to engineer trucks for real-world needs, even if that meant appealing to a smaller audience. When World War II arrived, Dodge entered the conflict with an advantage few recognized at the time. The company was already accustomed to building machines that could absorb punishment. Four-wheel drive, tested experimentally during the 1930s, now faced the ultimate examination. War has a way of stripping away theory and leaving only results, and Dodge's trucks emerged with their reputation intact. By the time the war ended, many manufacturers were still struggling to convert their factories back to civilian production. Dodge moved quickly, and in doing so, delivered one of the most important trucks in American history, the Power Wagon. It was unapologetically simple. Flat glass that could be replaced easily, high ground clearance, a heavy ladder frame chassis, solid axles front and rear, a 2-speed transfer case with ultra-low gearing that allowed the truck to crawl forward with relentless torque. Most distinctive of all was the front-mounted PTO winch, capable of pulling logs, recovering vehicles, or raising poles straight from the transmission. The Power Wagon was not built to impress neighbors. It was built to reach places where roads barely existed. By 1949, Dodge had established something more valuable than market dominance. It had established character. Its trucks were not always the most comfortable, the most stylish, or the most popular, but they were trusted. In a market increasingly driven by image, Dodge remained anchored in function. And that identity, forged through war, loss, and survival, would carry the company into the next era where the truck would begin to change, and Dodge would be forced to change with it.